Hello and welcome back to part 2 of your ACCA SBL examination September 2024 sitting, where you're going to get your tutor analysis now, going through my exclusive notes for the September exam all about the company Beago. If you'd like access to these notes, as always, if you click the link into the description of this video, it's going to take you straight there. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on all the rest of the videos that are going to help you to pass your exam. And finally, before we get kicked off, as I'm sure you're aware from watching part 1, I am affiliated with Astranti, where I'd highly recommend that you check out their free ACCA packs and also their mocks, which again are money back guaranteed if you're not impressed with them. The links are down below, and as always, for pure transparency on the channel, if you were to purchase any of them, I'd be entitled to a small commission that goes to supporting the channel on there. But as ever, a massive thank you for all the support, and I'm recording as we go on these sort of things, so if you have any questions, leave me a comment below. I will get back to you and I can make some more videos to help you guys out to get you that pass on there. So if you have downloaded my notes, you can follow it through and make your own actual notes yourself on there just to help you out. Going on from where we left off from part 1, we're starting on the Beeland market itself. And this is where it gets interesting and serious for your exam, and is going to be the difference in students passing or not. First thing to get noted down is the company Zenbi on there. In my notes, everything in purple are the key names, key companies, key individuals that you need to be referring to in your answers. Do not use the words of it or they. Refer to them directly on there. And key bit is that Beago is the second largest company in Beeland. Zenbi is the largest, and therefore they are the two dominant figures, or dominant companies should we say. Between them they have 85% shareholding, so this is where, from a theory perspective for your notes, Porter's 5 forces, one of the key areas to that is competitive rivalry. So therefore, again, we've got a massive area that we can talk about here. 14 years ago, Zenbi was actually founded, and then 2 years after that, Beago was introduced to the market. So from a strategy perspective and growth, Zenbi had what I like to call the sort of first mover advantage, the original on there, and that's where their branding may have that sort of foundation, that establishment. And the X key bit for your notes, and you can follow mine that are underlined, to differentiate between the two, Zenbi is globally based, and one of the places they operate is in Beeland, whereas Beago, on the other hand, is just purely based in Beeland on there. So from an opportunity point of view, from Beago's position, if we're looking at a SWOT analysis, well, why are Beago not considering to be operating globally on there? Again, little things that you could throw out there when it comes to your exam if it got tested as a requirement. And in terms of, say, data factors and advances in technology, scale, operations, just have that perspective in your mind that with Zenbi being so globally based, the scale of this company and the synergies that they could have, they're operating on a different level compared to Beago. However, on the other hand, Beago has that advantage of, because they're sort of more locally based and just in Beeland, that is where they build a better rapport because they're operating in 250 cities on there. So it's a balance as to what you've got to consider from that sort of competitive rivalry, Porter's 5 forces sort of way of looking at it. But size, economies of scale I've got in my notes, expertise, I talked about synergies, the brand, trust, reliability, systems. All these little variables could also factor into, say, the technology point of a pestle theory application on there. Another interesting sort of specific area that I think could come up from maybe an ethical point of view or a sort of threat, especially in a SWOT analysis, is that in Beeland, the local authorities hold the main power. They set the criteria for Zenbi, for Beago, and their drivers. So if there was to be some sort of issue, shall we say, on there, then that could be a massive logistics nightmare when it comes to operating the business if they don't have those operating licenses. Beeland as a market itself is very attractive, so that is where there's lots of opportunities for new entrants on there. But again, that comes down to, well, the growth opportunities from an Ansoff matrix point of view. That's another theory on the SBL syllabus, where they've got to look at the existing market versus the actual potential new markets. And Beago as a new market, you've got two options. You've got different cities, new cities they've not entered in Beeland, or operating globally. Could be something that you could throw out there if it was referred to and tested. The 85% for Zenby and Beago on there, they're massive in terms of Beeland itself, which we've touched on. It's a competitive market, but it's a barrier to entry that you need to get down in your notes, that when you've got two massive competitors at 85%, it could only really take another large multinational PLC to come on board. But they're attracted by the number of users going up and also the amount of revenue, which again has been increasing year on year. You can see that in the figures at the bottom, the customers' numbers that have been registered. They've doubled in the last 8 years. Again, more specific areas for you to refer to actually in your answers on there. And linking to it, by the end of 2003, 25% of Beeland's population were active users in the TNC actual services. So you've got to say to yourself, a quarter of the population, so that's 50 million, you'll see from the diagram on the left-hand side, TNC user growth in Beeland. So it's just ticking up to 50 million, because that's give or take 25% of the 200 million population we saw in the part 1 video. So from a Beago perspective, I'm thinking, right, when I read this through, how can they differentiate themselves? What's their unique selling point? I think because they just operate in the local market, they build that rapport with customers. But then you've got to be thinking from a strategic point of view, the sort of short-term and especially long-term aspect on here, from how can we actually shape the strategy? And that's where we may have changes in factor conditions, such as the economy. And this is where, for your notes, Porter's diamond could come into it as one of these sort of other theory areas, not as regularly tested, but definitely something to bear in mind on there. Coming on to that 85%, you can see my calculations up at the top, and they've come from the market share actually on the little diagram that you can see. It's roughly about 55% for Zenby, 30% for Beago on there. And in terms of if you get asked about how could Beago grow here, well, you've either got to get the frequency of the customers actually using the platform going up more, and that's because there are other alternatives on there. There's the threat of substitutes, and this is another factor of Porter's 5 forces: the traditional taxi cabs, public transport, trains, buses, cycling, walking. These are factors to consider. And what Beago have got to consider on here before we come on to the services is actually maybe expanding those services, diversifying their revenue streams, or even looking at a new demographic of users on there. So looking at all the variables to go, where can we get bigger? Because Zenby is struggling to maintain its customer base. It's dropping off year on year on year. You can see on the market share, the dominance is being eroded from 100% down to about 55 now. And just so you can see, linking back to the notes, they said when Beago started operating in 20W2, and that's when you can just see their share, market share starting to grow from there, but they're consistently going up year on year. In terms of the user groups on the next diagram, positively, it's going up on a good trajectory. Is it possibly tailing off in 2003? Something to bear in mind on the exam day, just to be aware of on there. We then come on to, and just be careful on those correct years I've just put on there as a final note on there. Everything's on an upward trend, but one of the key things to bear in mind now are those services. And I've just put on the side, the percentages on the side are for Beago, what they actually do. Again, you can read through these in your own time, but I'm just going to go through the key bits on here. Service ride sharing, it does what it says on the tin, i.e. you share a ride with other people going the same way. The interesting points on here are that Zenby and Beago initially established themselves as businesses using this business model, but it tends to be only used by students, for example, on there who want that cheaper alternative. But it's basically saying if you want to go to somewhere and a car's already passing by, that is where you can then just hop in that car as well. Both Zenby and Beago have branched out into other income streams, But the key bit on here from a sort of technology point of view and a customer preference, because it's the customers who are deciding on here, just in case you get this as a stakeholder analysis, the system won't do it automatically to put you into a shared ride. It's up to the customer to select it. So again, comes down to their tastes and preferences, where you can see there the ride hailing is at 72%, what customers mainly prefer. The government as a stakeholder group on there is definitely interested, and from an environmental perspective, from your pestle theory analysis now, all about reducing congestion and the impact on the environment. Because if you've got less people going on single-use cars, that means if they're sharing cars, less are on the road and less emissions on there. Ride-hailing and micro-mobility are the next two now. And whilst we're talking about this as to the different revenue streams, these are the threats of substitutes for Porter's 5 forces that you go, okay, what are the different areas that we're looking at here? Or should I say I think that could be one area from a substitute like competitors to competitor. But the other theory for this is Ansoff's matrix, because you've got to be looking at what are the existing products and what are the potential new products on there. And the existing ones we're going through now, the ride-hailing, micro-mobility, it does what it says on the tin for ride-hailing. The core service, just like Uber, just like Grab, it's their main steady revenue on there, and it's their most popular service. So make sure you note that down. 3/4 of the revenue comes from there, and you can get it on demand or scheduled. So again, it used to be the old days, you just hail down a cab, which means you put your hand up, say, hey, I need a cab, and whereas now it's on the app and then you do it that way on there. Micromobility is an interesting one on here, where if you're from the UK, you'll know this from the Boris bikes. If you're not from the UK, the principle is that these bikes are in sort of little bays and pods that you go along with your app, tap it on there, and then you take it to another bay or pod, usually close to where you work on there. So from again, it's a sort of shorter trips to avoid heavy traffic, a lot cheaper on there. So considering the different stakeholder groups, again, environmentalists, customers who maybe want this as an alternative, cheaper option. What I thought Beago did really well here, and we get a bit more information later on, is they didn't just set up and do it themselves. They actually bought and acquired a company with the expertise and the foundation. So again, from a strategy point of view, they've done it once, they could do it again, could be a way of expanding their business. And from the other column on the market share graph up above, customers that use TNC's platform book and pay for the bicycle rental on there, so positive in terms of how it actually is used. But then I'm thinking, what else is going on in the real world that the SBL examiners could give you credit for actually applying? And you see them in London. When I went to Prague, they're everywhere. You get those Lime scooters. Again, real world applications from different modes of transport that are being adopted globally on there. I'll come back to the other part of the graph when I come on to the other sources of revenue. But what Zenbi and Beago are doing in terms of their services, there are some grey areas that I go, well, what is currently going on? I'll put it back up because we've got the service base and business service base. Now, if I put my mouse on where I'm referring to, it's this part here on the left. If you look at those other services, and this is the competitive rivalry, the threats to them as the market leaders, is that the other market share is growing steadily year on year on year. And you can see from the service rentals and the business services, Beago on there have no customer rentals. They only have 5% business services. They've only just started doing it. So there is a risk on there to new entrants coming into the market, meeting the demands and changing the conditions for it. But from a SWOT analysis point of view, from the services, you've got on there a massive opportunity. Again, it's all on the same platform. It's car rental businesses on there, wider, further revenue streams, but they're not actually utilizing it. You'll see it when we come on to the KPIs further down. It's broken down. They have none. So again, it's a really important point for you to note down on there, and I really wanted to highlight as a result. Beago doesn't currently have any revenue on there, so we could be having it as a more premium service, all on the same platform again. And the last one we've got is the business services. So they've only been doing this for the last 2 years, who are then it's relating through the business platforms that they look after their employees and customers. And the key thing there is they're going to have a good reputation. So I went, well, these business owners are then going to travel themselves. So they're going to be potentially actually downloading Beago's app, and they could be new customers on there. It could actually increase the revenue, and it's based on contract income. It's only 5% at the moment. Could be another revenue stream that they could actually look to increase on there. But linking back to that other column, I'm just there going, how is the other column for market share going up and up and up? What are they doing differently on there? And I think it's going to be some of these services that are currently in place, and there are others further down. I'll quickly scroll it onto, but we'll come on to it in a moment. You can see on there the latest developments, the food delivery services, driverless, electric vehicles. That is those are some of the areas, that I think that other shareholders are taking the market share away from the other companies, because they're specialising in these new areas coming up on there. Whew. Well, guys, that takes us through part 2, where I'm going to go through in part 3 now the TNC customers. I want to focus that and make sure that you get a little break on there. If you want to check out these notes, click the link down below, along with the Stranti's mock papers. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on any other videos, and I'll see you on the other side now for part 3. So thank you very much.